Welcome tonight. Thank you for coming out on a somewhat beautiful evening to hear the presentation. I am Kristen Greenberg. I am the director of the Upper Arlington Historical Society. Let's talk about the presentation tonight. We're welcoming brothers Darrell and Craig Heckman. I understand many of you went to school with them or know them. They graduated from UA in 67 and 69. They are both lawyers, attorneys. Darrell practiced law for 43 years and was prosecuting attorney of Champaign County, Ohio. And Craig practiced general law in Ohio, healthcare law in Kentucky. And he's currently an adjunct faculty member at the University of Western Kentucky. I am told that they had a phone conversation about Lisa Davenport and were remembering facts, and then it became a competition. Who could find more information about Lisa Davenport? Brotherly love competition, and we're here to hear the benefit of that competition tonight. So without further ado, I will ask Darrell to come on up and get started. We're going to use...
Oh, okay. Let's do a mic check. Back row, hear me okay? Okay, good. Let's get a show of hands here. Who remembers this case? Not very many. And it's kind of funny because how many of you were living in Columbus in 1966? Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And maybe the reason Craig and I remembered so well is because, we knew we were going to be lawyers. I don't know. But I moved back to Columbus 2 years ago, and Craig and I got to talking, and said, "Boy, you remember that Lisa Davenport case?" And that was really something. I said, "That'd make a good presentation." And I have given a few presentations to the Champaign County Historical Society when I lived in Urbana, and I thought, well, this will work. So I got active in the Historical Society, and we decided we'd make a pitch to Kristen and the board, and they were curious as to what this was. We were going to talk about murder, Upper Arlington. Wow, was there really such a thing? Is it interesting? But I auditioned for this program last summer, and they approved it, and we've been working on it ever since. Especially Kristen said there was a competition. Craig's the winner. He did way more research than I did on this thing. So I want to say this. The 1960s was a golden era for journalism. Columbus had 2 daily newspapers. The Citizen Journal in the morning, the Dispatch in the afternoon. And they had reporters. And they weren't printed in Indianapolis, and you didn't get the score of the Buckeye game on Tuesday. You got the information the next day. And why? It was a big deal to be the morning paper because you scooped the other guy. And the Journal was the morning paper, and the Dispatch wanted to be the morning paper. So what the reporters reported sold papers, and they had good reporters. Now, I want to say something about the golden era of journalism. We are not responsible for the politically incorrect language of the 1960s. Because you will see Lisa Davenport referred to as vivacious, as darling, as attractive, as an erstwhile ballerina, etc., etc., etc. And that was the language of the time. So we embrace it, but we don't take responsibility for it. I would be remiss if we didn't give a big shout out to the Upper Arlington Police Department. The Ohio Public Records law allows law enforcement to decline public records requests for pending investigations. And even though it's been 59 years since the case was never solved, this is still a pending investigation. And we had at least one entity whom we will not refer to now that declined our request for public records on that basis. But the UAPD gave us a lot of stuff, and after they gave us the first round of stuff, Craig talked to the city attorney and asked if we could maybe get some more stuff, since after all it's been 59 years, and they gave us even more stuff. In fact, that's how much stuff their file was that they showed to us. So the grass did not grow under the Upper Arlington Police Department. They worked hard on this case. It's just mysterious. I think our presentation is going to be in two parts, so we're going to start with Craig with the first part of the mysterious life of Lisa Davenport.
Thank you. I will name the entity that didn't help us by giving us their stuff. It was BCI. Okay. Lisa was described by a friend from Lima as extremely intelligent, sophisticated, cosmopolitan. Another friend described her as very restless and a frustrated girl. A third friend described her as a swinger. Once again, their words, not mine. And another friend said that she had led a bizarre life. What she meant by that, we're not sure. But those are the descriptions of her friends. The coroner described her as a petite 32-year-old with 2 bullet holes through her heart. The newspapers never failed to mention that Lisa was attractive, young, blonde, and petite. The papers seemed to almost stumble over each other in terms of using words like vivacious. The Columbus Dispatch loved to refer to her as the British-born beauty. She was referred to sometimes as dazzling. She was a woman that certainly attracted attention in lots of ways, and the newspapers, they loved that aspect of the story. She was photogenic. Let's see if we've got, there we go. She was photogenic. Well before her death, her photo appeared in newspapers in both Lima and Columbus. In the Columbus Dispatch, it was a YMCA fund drive that attracted the attention of the press. In the Lima papers, it usually related to the fact that she was involved in community theater in Lima. She frequently told people that she was orphaned when her wealthy parents in England died in a plane crash. She said she attended the best schools in England and used her inheritance to travel the world until the money ran out. She also told people that she'd been performing as a ballet dancer in Europe until, while on stage, she broke her ankle. The ankle break was said by Lisa to be such a traumatic event that she had a nervous breakdown. Other versions of her backstory surfaced over time. She told some people that her parents died in a car crash. Somehow, she always seemed to be able to remember who she had told it was a car crash and who she had told it was a plane crash. I don't know how she did it, but she did. She was born Rosebud Hillary Hayward in Sculcoach, Yorkshire, England, in the spring of 1934. The birth rolls list her mother's last name as Hayward, but don't list a father. In her later life, she told her closest friends that she was ashamed of the fact that she was an illegitimate child. Her mother had 9 children. Rosebud Hillary was the 8th of her mother's 9 children. Her mother said that her father was a bigamist. What she meant by that, I don't know, but watch for that word later this evening. As an infant, she lived in Heddon. Heddon is a city in the north of England, adjacent to the city of Hull. It's along the Humber River. Hull and Heddon are separated by a power plant, an oil refinery, and the silted up remains of a river that once upon a time was the reason for Heddon's separate existence as a city. Little is known about her early childhood. We do know that her family called her Betty. So we go from Rosebud Hillary Hayward to Betty Hayward. Why they called her Betty, we're not really sure. By her mother's account, when Betty was 18 months old, she went to live with her grandmother until she was 3. Then when she was 5, she moved, her mother married a man with the last name of Williams, and she started to call herself Betty Williams. So it went from Rosebud Hillary Hayward to Betty Hayward to Betty Williams. This is by the time that she's 5 years old. It's at about that time that England entered World War II. Hull was only 250 miles from occupied Holland and from the German Air Force bases in occupied Holland. Hull was pounded by the bomber runs of the German Air Force. On May the 7th and May the 8th of 1941, Hull was the victim of 29,000 incendiary bombs that were dropped in 2 days on that city. Obviously, the oil refinery and the power plant were the intended victims of that, but during the course of the war, over 1,200 people, 1,200 civilians in Hull died as a result of the war. Whatever part of the war that Betty, or Rosebud, was in Hull, it had to be a pretty traumatizing experience. We do know that, like many children in England, during the course of the war, she moved to a safer place. She moved to Wales for her sanctuary. We don't really know a lot about her time in Wales, other than we do know that she was separated from her siblings and separated from her mother. Knowing what's true and knowing what's self-invented myth has not been particularly easy to discover with this woman. It is certain, however, that some stories that she told are irreconcilable, and some are simply made up. That is for sure. Hull came out of the war with a need to rebuild itself and take on a new identity. Most of the city was rebuilt from scratch. I think, yeah, this is Hull in 1941. Hull took a real beating during that time. There were 83 bomber missions that pounded Hull during the course of the war. So Hull took on the need to rebuild itself, take on a new identity, and maybe this was the inspiration for Rosebud, who would on more than one occasion start from scratch with a rebuilt, reinvented self. After the war, she was reunited with her mother in Chatham. Now, Chatham is about 35 miles east of London, so they had moved south. There, she attended the girls' school, the Chatham Christ Church School. While she was a good student, according to her mother at least, her mother said she was an excellent student. Her mother also says that when she wasn't in school, she was down the street at the Salvation Army, the Chatham Salvation Army, where she spent most of her time. When she turned 16, she dropped out of school, and she was turned over to a family friend, Mrs. Duffield. Mrs. Duffield and Lisa then moved to Birmingham, England. Sometime we're not sure about that period of life, other than we know she worked in a grocery shop during that period of time. Shortly after her 18th birthday, she enlisted in the Royal Air Force. By this point, she had reverted, this is her Air Force picture, she had reverted to calling herself Rosebud Hillary Hayward. So, you know, the name's kind of, this is what makes it hard to do a lot of research on her, because she changes names all the time. Okay, it's a challenge. At any rate, she joins the Royal Air Force, and while she's in the Air Force, she has a nervous breakdown. During the course of that nervous breakdown, she meets Dennis Nichols. Dennis Nichols was 13 years her senior. He was also in the Royal Air Force. Lisa was 20 by this point, and they were married. They married in Birmingham, England, and then in 1960, they moved to Canada, presumably as part of his career in the Air Force. Winnipeg, Canada was one of the primary training centers for the air forces of all the Commonwealth countries at that time, and presumably that's what they were doing in Winnipeg. 2 years after they arrived in Winnipeg, she left Canada for the United States. Dennis Nichols stayed in Winnipeg. While she was in Winnipeg, she worked at the Charthouse Motor Hotel. She worked at the desk there. She took reservations for rental cars and seemingly did work for the hotel. While she was working at the Charthouse, she met an American, a fellow by the name of Roger Nation. Roger Nation lived in Minneapolis, and he helped Rosebud move to Minneapolis. Later, he told police that Rosebud had a wealthy banker friend that had helped her with her immigration issues, that he just helped with the move. What we do know, though, we do know that, I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of there. I'm getting so excited about this. We do know that at this point, she started to call herself Lisbeth, okay? Instead of Rosebud or Hillary or Haywood, she now called herself Lisbeth Nichols, because she told people that she and Mr. Nichols were married to each other, okay? She didn't like the name Rosebud. She never liked the name Rosebud. So she took this name. But we also know, and it bears telling, I think, that in 1962, when she was filling out her immigration papers, she played it straight and she used her Rosebud name, because it's never a good idea to mess with the immigration people. You know how that goes. It's not a good thing at all. So play it straight with them. We do know that in the immigration papers in 1962, she listed her mother as living in the Southgate area of London and listed her mother's occupation as being a domestic. So apparently she had forgotten that her mother and father had died in a plane crash, leaving her a wealthy but somewhat restless heiress. Or maybe she just had not yet invented that part of her backstory, okay? It should be noted that on at least one job application, she listed her name as Southgate-Hayward. Maybe that was just a little nod to where her mother lived in England, I don't really know. What caused Dennis Nichols and Rosebud to split up, is not really clear, but we do know this, that Mr. Nichols, who was her husband in England, Mr. Nichols, the husband in England, he filed for a divorce in Manitoba, and he, in his divorce pleadings, said that she had been corresponding with, that's fancy legal talk for having sex with, maybe I should just call it that she had sex with a man by the name of Roger T. Nation. Roger Nation, that's Mr. Nation, thank you. Mr. Nation was living in Minneapolis, and this is the man that helped her move from Manitoba to Minneapolis. He was a graduate of Eastern Illinois University. He worked for a company that manufactured heavy equipment, road construction equipment. He was a Civil War reenactor. And in December of 1962, and I'm sorry I did the story a little out of order, I apologize. Nichols and Nation, even in my head I get confused a little sometimes, but in 1962, in December of 1962, Roger Nation, this fellow, shows up in Lima, Ohio. He shows up at Lima, Ohio at the Christmas party at the Lost Creek Country Club. He's one of only 3 people that signed the guest register that night as not Mr. and Mrs. He seemingly attended the party by himself. And we know that a month later, he accepted a job in Lima with a company that made the same kind of equipment that his employer in Minneapolis did. We also know that in the Lima paper it said that Mr. Nation would be moving from Minneapolis to Lima and that he would be bringing his wife, Clarissa. So now we have Clarissa to add to all the other names. I can find no evidence of Clarissa making the move to Lima, but we do know that Lisbeth made the move to Lima. It wasn't long until Lisbeth grew tired of the name Lisbeth and decided to jettison that name as she jettisoned the other names and went from being Lisbeth Nichols when she came across from Canada to Lisa Nation when she arrived in Lima, okay? She joined a local community theater group. She told people that she was married to Mr. Nation, and while she was performing in local theater groups, she appeared in what else? The play The Heiress. Seems so appropriate. Her performance got the attention of one critic who wrote, "Ordinary parts are often given to extraordinary persons, such is the case with Lisa Nation." Ooh, what a nice review. If you want to write a review about tonight's thing, you can write that about me. I'd be pretty happy. Okay, but once again, this bliss did not really endure. She told her friends that she discovered that Mr. Nation was a bigamist. It's like, okay, that word popped up again. She told her friends that she discovered that he was a bigamist and that she had to have the marriage annulled. Now, I have researched both the records in Manitoba and the records in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. I can find no record of her being married to Mr. Nation or of her having her marriage with Mr. Nation annulled, but that's what she told people. I think if we think about it, we're talking about the early 1960s, and I think we have to recognize that it was a useful story to say that the marriage was annulled. I think that that was a practical thing to do. It was also practical to say that she was married to Mr. Nation. I think it would be hard to get an apartment in 1962 in Lima if you weren't married, okay? So, I mean, I think we can kind of understand where this part of her story comes from. We don't really know how much she knew or didn't know about Mr. Nation's other family, but we have to also remember that in 1962, it was still a crime in Ohio to have carnal knowledge of a married person that was not your spouse. That law wasn't repealed until 1973. So again, I think it's a convenient story for the unlucky in love, Lisa, to tell the story I was married and it just didn't work out because he was a bigamist, so we got it annulled. Okay. So by the spring of 1964, she's been living in Lima for about a year and a half, and she moves to Columbus. Initially, she moved to Columbus and she lived with a friend who she knew from Lima that had made the move a couple of months ahead of her. It's not really clear where she met Ed. Whoops, that's her in the heiress. Yeah, that's great. Okay. She finds Ed Davenport. We're not sure where or when, but she instantly fell in love with Ed Davenport, and within 6 months of moving to Columbus, she married Ed Davenport. Ed had been a Worthington police officer. At the time of Lisa's death, he was working for Buckeye Federal Savings and Loan. She was working for General American Credits Corporation downtown. They had an apartment on Suffolk Road in Arlington. I used to walk by every day on my way to junior high. All this was happening while I was at Jones Junior High as a 9th grader. It does seem fairly clear that her 18-month marriage to Ed was a rocky one. That's exactly the word that he used in describing it to both the police and to the press. So after 4 months, they got married on Christmas Day of 1962. They got married on Christmas Day of 1964. I'm sorry, that's right. Thank you, Darrell. I have a guy that can correct me, my fact checker. Within 4 months of getting married, they separated. And when they separated, she lived in the apartment on the left, and he lived in the apartment on the right. Okay, so as you might guess, this created some problems from time to time. During the time that she was living in the apartment on the left on Suffolk and he was in the apartment on the right, there was a man named H.C. And H.C. was visiting Lisa one day. Ed saw H.C. go into Lisa's apartment. So Ed Davenport grabbed his friend Lou Gray, and with Lou Gray and 357 Magnum, they went next door and kicked in the door. Now, Ed admits that he had the gun, but said it was only in his waistband. H.C. said the gun was drawn. One way or another, after some discussion, H.C. explained that he didn't know that Lisa was married. This apparently satisfied Ed because at the conclusion of this meeting with the 357 Magnum, Ed and his friend Lou Gray, they all went next door to Ed's to have a drink together. So it was a different time, okay? There's some things I still just don't quite understand about this story, and that was one of them. By the fall of 1965, Ed and Lisa had reconciled, so they were apart for about 4 months, apart but only 100 feet apart. So in November of 1965, they moved from their Suffolk Road apartments, plural, to their home on Cranford Road in Arlington. After less than a year of marriage, Ed filed for divorce. So they were married, they were separated, and then within a few months, he filed for divorce. She immediately countersued for divorce. These divorce actions against each other lasted less than a month before they reconciled, and everybody was hunky-dory again, apparently. Maybe stranger, though, than the sort of bro bonding on Suffolk Road with Ed and Lou and the 357 Magnum was the sightings of Lisa at the J&M Grill. I'm not going to ask how many of you spend time at the J&M Grill, but the J&M Grill was, at that time, in a pretty seedy part of downtown. We were in the midst of the Market Mohawk project. Many of you will remember it. Things were getting torn down. This was right, everything behind it was getting torn down. It was somehow saved. This again is in this would be 1966, in early 1966. And there were sightings of Lisa at the J&M Grill. This is not the kind of place where you would expect to find a proper woman in those days. This is not my puritanical spin, although it could be, but it's not my puritanical spin. I will instead tell you what one of the patrons of the J&M Grill said to the Columbus Dispatch. He said, "I'm sure the girl I saw was Lisa Davenport. When a woman like her goes into a place like that, everybody notices her. She just didn't look like the kind of women that normally hang out there. It's not the kind of thing you'd forget. She had that ability. She caught people's attention wherever she went." He was not the only one that remembered seeing Lisa there. 2 employees of the bar. I love these pictures. This one, I can't remember if this is the Dispatch or the Journal, but this is one of them. 2 employees at the bar and a second customer also remembered seeing her there. The barmaid found it so memorable that even though Lisa's appearance at the bar had been more than 2 months before, she remembered which booth Lisa had sat in and what beer her male companion was drinking. The male companion, I don't want to get too far off track here, but they said that Lisa was brought into the J&M Grill that night by a rocket scientist. Yes, a rocket scientist. Lauren Bollinger. Now, some of you may know that name. Bollinger was also a resident of Arlington. He lived on Wickford Road, less than 200 yards from where the Davenports lived on Suffolk. He was a professor of aeronautics at Ohio State and the author of a column on rocketry. He lived, like I say, very close to the Suffolk Road place. He was murdered. In a seedy apartment or a seedy office above the J&M Grill 16 days after Lisa was murdered. That was the appropriate response. I'm glad that everybody's still awake. So he's murdered in a shabby office above the J&M 16 days after Lisa is murdered. His murder, like Lisa's, remains unsolved. So, if you did it, please see me afterwards. There was supposed to be Detective Susie from the Arlington Police Department was going to be here tonight, and I got an email from her this afternoon. She said, I'm trying to buy this house. I'm looking at it again one more time tonight. I don't think I'll be there. And I said, the murderer is probably going to stand up at the end of this thing and confess. I was hoping for some backup, but I'll do what I can. All right, so despite the fact that the witnesses said that Lisa Davenport was playing shuffleboard and drinking with a rocket scientist at the J&M Grill, his friends doubted that because using the words of the day and using the words of the newspapers of the day, Professor Bollinger was a man with homosexual tendencies. I will say that the people at the time couldn't imagine why a man with homosexual tendencies would want to spend an evening with a beautiful woman playing shuffleboard at a dive bar. So it is what it is, but those are the stories of the day. So we'll get back on track with Lisa and her life. So much for Professor Bollinger. The final kind of odd piece of the pre-murder puzzle comes from the Vice Squad of the Columbus Police Department. The Columbus Police Department had been involved in a raid in the spring of 1966 on a house in the campus area. Now remember, in 1966, according to a Gallup poll, fewer than 4% of American adults had smoked marijuana. So this was a marijuana bust in the campus area. At that bust, I'm sorry, I forgot. Let's see. Oh, there's Professor Bollinger. Okay. During that bust, the phone rang. And one of the police officers that was engaged in the bust on the campus area house picked up the phone and pretended to be the resident of the apartment. The person on the other end identified themselves as Lisa Davenport and said, "Where's the party?" Okay? Proof? I don't know if it's proof or not. It is what it is. Following the Davenport murder, he reported that to the police officers that were engaged in the investigation of the Davenport murder. Finally, in the closing months of Lisa's life, she took a job, a non-paying job, as the editor of the Upper Arlington Welcome Wagons newsletter, The Chatter. And it seems to be a job that she enjoyed very much. The week before she was murdered, she and Ed attended the Welcome Wagons Las Vegas party at the Swim and Racket Club on Kenny Road. One partygoer at that event said that Lisa had danced up a storm, presumably not the ballet. Lisa wrote in her monthly column, which was not published until a month after she died, she wrote that she had danced, during the dance marathon, she had danced like a hullabaloo dancer for 22 minutes nonstop. Less than a month later, Lisa Davenport was dead. Darrell's now going to introduce the second part of the story. That's my best to tell you who she was. We will get to the murder in just a few minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have your attention, hopefully. What's it like to investigate a homicide? You know, I gained a lot of appreciation for this. As was stated, I was prosecuting attorney of Champaign County, Ohio for 8 years, and as the prosecutor, the police come to you after they've sifted through all this irrelevant stuff. And boy, was there a lot of irrelevant stuff in this case. And I just have a great appreciation for what the police do, because they have to follow every lead, no matter how silly it is. You'll see how many different gunshots were heard in Columbus on May 6th, 1966, all over the place. So we appreciate following the leads. Another thing to tell you, there will be inherent inconsistencies, no matter what you get, you know, whether it's the time that people had dinner, what they ate for dinner, who was there, what happened, and that's where we are. Now, again, Craig will get up here in a little bit, and we will give you the complete saturation of the press for the next 30 days in May of 1966 as to what happened, what might have happened, or what did happen. So with that the case, we'll get Craig to talk about the killing itself.
I'm rested up now. I'm ready to go. Okay. May the 9th, 1966 was unseasonably cold in northwestern Ohio. In fact, the temperature in Findlay had dropped below freezing that night. Rookie patrolman Ralph Ireland of the Findlay Police Department was on patrol that night, and he noticed a tan Ford Fairlane with multiple parking tickets on the windshield. It was nearly midnight. Monday night is not the busiest night in Findlay, so he called in the plates. And when the report came back, the report indicated that the car was subject to a statewide alert connected to a missing woman from Arlington. As Monday night bled into Tuesday morning, Ireland got out of his car, approached the Ford Fairlane, and noticed that the keys were still in the ignition, and a woman's purse was on the front seat. He radioed headquarters, and it was agreed that he should take the keys and open the trunk. In the trunk was the body of Lisa Davenport. Let's roll the clock back to the 80 hours before the trunk was opened. Unlike the frosty conditions in Findlay on Monday night, it was a beautiful spring day in Columbus. The temperatures were in the 70s, the sky was clear, and in fact, oh, there it is. Wait a minute, there we go. That's what Columbus looked like in '66. For those of you that weren't here, it was a different city. The Davenports, Lisa and Ed, both worked downtown, and they agreed to meet for dinner after work. They agreed that, well, let me back up. Ed had been out of the office most of the afternoon. As I said, he worked for Buckeye Federal Savings and Loan. He'd been out in the afternoon and said that he was out on collection calls. There is no documentation of him having made contact with any of the 6 people that he said he was going to contact that afternoon on the collection calls. He returned to the office and then left the office early at 4 o'clock. This is on a Friday afternoon. He left at 4 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock, when Lisa got off work, they met for dinner. They met at the Seafood Bay, okay? It's about a 2-block walk from Lisa's office and about a 3-block walk from Ed's office to where the Seafood Bay was. The waitress remembers serving Lisa and a man. She doesn't remember much about the man. Once again, Lisa was memorable. Seemingly every place she went, people, oh yeah, I remember that woman. That was the nature of Lisa Davenport. Maybe it was her British accent. I think it's safe to presume that the man was Ed Davenport. That certainly is what he says. The waitress says that the man and woman each had a vodka martini and that they ordered a lobster-based meal of some sort. I'm not sure what that was. They were served about 6:10 p.m. and that they left $1.50 as a tip. If in fact they were served at 6:10 p.m., they probably finished eating at about 6:25. Ed's account has them finishing dinner earlier than that by about 40 minutes. By his account, they finished dinner at about 5:45. Okay? Ed says that after dinner, they got into the couple's one functional car. They had two cars, but one of them was broken, sitting in the driveway on Cranford Road. Ed wanted to sell it because he thought they could get by with one car. Lisa wanted to sell it because she wanted them to buy a sports car. Okay? By Ed's account, they then drove from the Seafood Bay to Lou Gray's place. You may remember Lou Gray as the guy that helped kick in the door on Suffolk Road. So Lou and Ed were good friends, and they stopped at Lou Gray's. And once, according to Ed's account, once they were at Lou Gray's, they took the luggage from the back seat and put the luggage in the trunk. And then Ed waved goodbye to Lisa, and she took off. Presumably, by Ed's account, she was headed to Lima, Ohio. Okay? Not to Findlay, where she was found. She was headed to Lima. According to Ed, the plan was that Lisa was going to go and visit a friend that lived in Lima. Now remember, Lisa had lived in Lima a year and a half prior to that. This is the last account we have of anybody saying they saw Lisa Davenport alive, and that is Ed and Lou Gray saying they saw her at the intersection of Kinnear and Kenny Road, which is where Lou Gray's apartment was. This is the last confirmed sighting, if you will, if you believe Lou and Ed, okay? We know that in the weeks prior to the murder, that Lisa had talked to her friend Shirley in Lima and had talked about going to visit Shirley. So that's been confirmed by the police interviews with Shirley. When Shirley was asked by the police if she knew that Lisa was coming that weekend, she said, "I didn't know Lisa was coming this weekend. News to me." Okay? Shirley also told police that Lisa had confided in her that Ed had been physically abusive toward Lisa. This was one of several people that the police talked to that told similar stories about Lisa's claims of physical abuse at the hands of Ed. One witness described the time that she saw Lisa limping and with a bruise. Lisa said that that was a consequence of Ed having pushed her down the stairs at Ed's parents' house. This is a good time to talk about time of death, because it's always a good time to talk about time of death. In the absence of witnesses, time of death is always an estimate, okay? This is not super exact stuff. The estimated time of death in this case is based on the condition of the undigested food in Lisa's stomach. Within the world of medical examiners, there's a spirited debate about the accuracy of this method for establishing time of death. I have read peer-reviewed journals that put the confidence levels using that technique at 90 to 95%, which is remarkably high. But I have also read studies that are scathing criticisms of this methodology. In 2023, a German study that I read wrote, "The physical and chemical facets of digestion are beset by so many imponderables and variables that one cannot rely on the extent of mechanical dissolution and chemical breakdown of gastric content to help reach a reasonable estimate." So because of the fact that the body was in an enclosed space, the trunk of a car, and because of the passage of time that is likely between the time of death and the time it was found, gastric emptying was about the only methodology that was available in 1966 for estimating the time of death. And again, estimating is the critical word in that. The medical examiner estimated the time of death, or more accurately, I should say, the time that had passed since she had eaten until she died, as being between 1 and 3 hours. Unfortunately, as you already know from the conflicting timelines of the waitress and Ed and what time they got off work, we really don't know when to start that 1 to 3 hour clock. You know, is it 40 minutes earlier? Is it 40 minutes later? Is it somewhere in there? Starting that 1 to 3 hour clock is important if you want to follow the timeline of this case, and unfortunately, it's really hard to know when to start that. If the server at the Seafood Bay is right, if the server at the Seafood Bay is accurate with her recollections, and Lisa ate, and the medical examiner's gastric emptying calculations are to be accepted, then we can put the time of death as likely being between 7:25 at the earliest and 10:25 at the latest. So That would be the bottom one of these two diagrams. If we go with Ed and Lou Gray's timeline, then the meal would have been finished earlier in the evening, and the estimated time of death would be pushed back to 6:45, and would be between 6:45 and 9:45, 9:50. Now, the size of these triangles is nothing magic. This is simply to show that there's a bit of a bell curve associated with this. It's more likely that the time of death is less likely at the extremes of the estimate and more likely in the middle sections. So where it is and which timeline, they're not a lot different, but we're talking about some pretty narrow windows if you have in mind a particular suspect for this case. So this chart shows the two timelines based on the waitress's story and based on Ed Davenport's story. I have a tendency to buy Ed Davenport's story, and that is it's the earlier of the two, starting with time of death as early as 6:50, 6:45. Okay, we know this is Patrolman Ireland on the streets of Findlay showing where the car was parked. Okay, I love the recreation. He's showing us where the car was found. How the car got there is a mystery. If we roll the clock back to 1966, there were two practical ways to drive from Arlington to Lima, and they're shown by the red dots on this map. I drove both of those dozens of times between 1969, when I started at Bowling Green State University, and 1976, when I graduated from the University of Toledo. This was a route I drove dozens and dozens of times. I did both of those routes, kind of depending on the whim I was in, I suppose. So those are the most common, but obviously, connecting any 2 points with the roads, there could be an infinite number of ways to get from place A to B. The purple routes are the ways that are most likely to get to Lima. It's a little more straightforward. I think there are less options, realistically, for getting to Lima. You either bend north around Indian Lake or you bend south around Indian Lake. If you're going to be going to Lima and you jump off and decide to go to Findlay, there are lots of roads to jump off on and head north. Unfortunately, we have no witnesses to the murder, and there's no real way to know where the murder occurred. It could literally have occurred any place within 3 hours of the Seafood Bay. That includes every square inch of the state of Ohio. We don't know where this murder took place. I can't tell you where she was murdered. I can't tell you with precision when she was murdered, but we have some clues about the where. We know that she was found in the trunk of the car. She was found in the trunk of that car. The county coroner said that she wasn't stuffed in the trunk. She was gently placed in the trunk. More importantly was what was in her hand. In her one hand was the symbol of spring in Ohio, a dandelion. Also, blades of grass. The front of her trench coat was grass-stained. The evidence shows that she was shot 4 times, twice in the back and twice in the right side. Whether she was forced to her knees and shot, or whether she was fleeing from the shooter and fell, it's not really clear. I would love to see the BCI's report, but BCI won't give it to us, so they're on my bad list. And if any of you are from BCI, I want to talk to you, okay? Despite our requests, they've stonewalled us on that. We also know that in the trunk of the car were pine needles. There are a lot of pine trees in the state of Ohio, okay? Nevertheless. We also know that no bullets were recovered. There were, 4 bullets that entered her body. None of those bullets were recovered. We also know that the police report indicates that she was not sexually molested. We also know that the police report indicates that there were no signs of a struggle in the car. When Patrolman Ireland found the car on Main Street in Findlay, as I had indicated earlier, the keys were in the ignition, the purse was on the front seat. Ed said that Lisa had cashed her paycheck before leaving town. In addition to having her paycheck with her, the cash from her paycheck being cashed, he gave her another $30. Now, that money was nowhere to be seen, okay? Also missing, in addition to the money, were these glasses. This is a replica of her glasses that a optometrist had her prescription and said, I'll make some just like it for you. Not for me, but for the police. So these glasses were missing. She apparently never drove without her glasses. So missing was the money, missing were her glasses, missing was a small case that had 3 cameras in it, and missing was a small overnight bag. I want to pause for just a moment, though, and let you digest the significance of the money. To me, the money is an important clue in this matter. It strikes me as peculiar that she had what would be the equivalent in today's dollars of $1,200 by cashing her paycheck. Okay? Who takes $1,200 to go for the weekend when you're going to stay with your friend? Okay? I mean, that just strikes me as odd. And then, if you've got $1,200, why does your husband give you another $30? Okay? Which, you know, we can do the math. That comes out as about $275 in today's dollars. If she did get behind the wheel and was headed out of town, I think she intended to be gone for more than just the weekend. Why else take $1,200 with you? If she did not get behind the wheel, if in fact she never got in the car and never got behind the steering wheel, then the murderer pocketed the money to make it look like there'd been a robbery on the way to Lima. There's a third possibility. I suppose it's possible that she just didn't trust Ed with the $1,200 for the weekend, so she took it with her. Okay, don't know. In addition, excuse me, in addition to the 7 cents that were in her purse, in addition to the 7 cents in her purse, there was a stirring stick, a cocktail stir stick from the seafood bay, matches from the seafood bay, playing cards from Harold's Club in Reno, half a pack of Salem cigarettes, 3 types of lipstick, and perfume. Her scent was Crescendo. And lest we forget, her membership cards, her membership to the American Museum of Natural History, and her charter membership card to the Dayton Area Beatles fan club. You know, I think it's easy to forget how human these people are, okay? The car was dusted for fingerprints. No unexpected prints were found. The police said there was unusual dirt under the undercarriage. And just for a second, I think we all have to stop and remember this investigation took place. No license plate cams, no cell phone records, no doorbell cams. I mean, this is, by our modern thinking, well, you just go and get the cell phone records, you just go and get the license plate readers, you just go, none of this. This is a different era, okay? So let's follow Ed from the Seafood Bay. He says that after he was dropped off at his friend Lou Gray's, that they went to the Players Club. The Players Club was a theater group in downtown Columbus on East Franklin Avenue, sort of behind the main library in Columbus, that they went to the Players Club and they were there all evening watching a rehearsal of a play. Lou Gray was a member of the Players Club and was very involved in local theater. When they got to the Players Club is not certain. Some of the witnesses say 7:15, some of them say 8 o'clock. So somewhere in that 7:15 to 8 o'clock is where they show up again. Remember how those timelines look for time of death. At 11 o'clock that night, they went from the Players Club, where many people saw them, they went to the Dell on Parsons Avenue, which was a popular grill on Parsons Avenue at the time. They stayed there and were there until about 12:30. From the Dell, they drove to, I think I've got this, yeah. From the Dell, they drove to, let's see, so they started out at Lou Gray's, they went down to the Players Club, from the Players Club to the Dell, and then from the Dell, they went all the way back up to Cranford Road. They went to Cranford Road supposedly because Ed wanted to shave and get cleaned up. This is at roughly 1 o'clock in the morning, before they then drove from Cranford Road to the south end of Columbus, where Ed's parents lived. I don't know who shaves at 1 o'clock in the morning because they're going to go visit their parents, but my parents were very disappointed I never did that for them, I'm sure. Nevertheless, I think that that's possibly a transcription error in the records. These interviews with the police were not recorded, they were ordinarily handwritten, which was very common at the time, and the FBI still uses that technique as I understand it. So it's possible that somebody wrote instead of shave and get cleaned up, which is what was written in the record, that it should have been picked up his shaving kit, because we do know he had his shaving kit later in the weekend when he was at his parents'. At any rate, Ed says that he arrives at his parents' on the south end at about 1:30 in the morning. He says he stayed up with his parents until 3 a.m. talking to them. Okay, so then after Lou drops Ed off, presumably Lou drives back up to the corner of Kinnear and Kenny Road. That's the last any of us see them until the next morning. Saturday morning, okay, remember Lisa gets killed on Friday night, whoops. On Saturday morning, the first we see Lou Gray is at about 10 a.m. at Swan Cleaners in Lane Shopping Center. He goes in with a pair of pants that have blood stains on the cuff of the pants. He talks to the people at Swan Cleaners, who remember it distinctly because it was a special order, and he explained to them how he had tried to remove the blood stain with peroxide unsuccessfully. Okay? When he was asked about this by the police, he said, "Oh, those were Ed's pants. I was just taking the pants in for Ed." And that's the only time I ever took Ed's pants to the dry cleaners, and the last time I'll ever do that. Okay. The first we see Ed that morning is at about 11 o'clock when a friend of his, now again, he's stranded at his parents' house with no car because Lisa has taken the car to Lima, presumably. A friend picks him up at about 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, takes him to the butcher shop and to the drugstore. While Ed and Lou are spotted in Columbus, the Davenport car, that's a side view of it, the Davenport car shows up in Findlay. We know it's in Findlay by 11:20 in the morning. However, there are two merchants in Findlay who are described by the chief of police as being reliable merchants, who said that they saw the car parked on the street at 8:30 in the morning, that they saw a man pull up, park the car there, sit in the car for a few minutes, get out, put his hand on the trunk of the car, and then walk away. When asked for a description of the man, the description was remarkably unremarkable. Okay, he was a man of average height with dark hair and clean shaven and might have been Italian, whatever that means, I'm not sure. Okay, so car might have been there as early as 8:30. We know, however, that it was there by 11:20 because 11:20 is when it got its first parking ticket. By the way, parking tickets in those days in Findlay were 25 cents. Okay? So if you remember, it's the multiple parking tickets that eventually got the attention of Patrolman Ireland. You probably want to know more about Lou Gray and about Ed Davenport, is my guess. So let's start with Lou Gray. He was an employee of WTVN Radio. In a very unusual move, immediately after the murder, WTVN hired a private investigator to dig into the case. Kind of strange. Stan Greenbaum. If any of us could get a hold of his file, please get a hold of it and share it with me. I'd like to read it. Why he was hired, we really don't know. Lou Gray was single. He drove a blue Porsche. He was involved in local theater, Stadium Theater, Players Club. He was an auxiliary member of the Worthington Police Department. If you remember, Ed used to be a member of the Worthington Police Department. His friend Lou was an auxiliary up there. And the week of the murder, he won a citywide contest to come up with an official song for the city of Columbus, Twin Rivers. His other activity that week may be more relevant. A woman who owned a farm near Grove City said that Lou came down to her farm and did some target practice with what he described as a new pistol. Lou did one interview with the police before his lawyer told him the Fifth Amendment is there for a reason, use it. Ed's story is a little more complicated. He was never very successful at holding a job. He was discharged from the military after injuring his foot. Between 1956 and 1966, he had 10 jobs. He worked as a police officer in Worthington. While he was on the Worthington Police Department, he discharged his gun in the police station one time accidentally. That's not how you get promoted, I don't think. He was working for Buckeye Federal Savings and Loan at the time of the murder. He was considered a hothead by multiple sources. One of the members of the Worthington Police Department said that the rumor was that Ed had tried to kill his second wife. Lisa was his third wife. That he had tried to kill his second wife by taking her to an abandoned quarry putting a blanket over her head and then holding her underwater. The chief of the Worthington Police Department said that Lisa had reason to fear Ed, and that he was aware that Ed had been violent toward Lisa. He also revealed that 4 years earlier, Ed had been under surveillance by the Columbus Police Department in association with a bank robbery. When asked by the chief of the Arlington Police Department, the chief of the Worthington Police Department was asked the question, could Ed kill somebody? The chief responded, under the right circumstances, yes. So let's return to the day after the murder. So the murder's Friday. Saturday, what was Lisa's schedule like on Saturday? Now remember, Ed says she's headed to Lima to see a friend. She had an appointment to get her hair done at Lazarus. That appointment was never canceled. She had plans to meet up with her friend Nancy. That never happened and was never canceled. She had arranged for somebody to come to her house to pick up a cat. That person showed up and was surprised that Lisa was not there. Ed said that he expected Lisa to be home Sunday night. She didn't like to drive in the dark and expected her to be home before dark. That didn't happen. Ed called Shirley, the friend in Lima, who said, no, I haven't seen her. I don't know anything about her coming. Eventually, at 1:19 in the morning on Monday, Ed calls the Arlington Police Department and files a missing persons report. Ed went back to work on Monday morning, understandably distracted. His wife was missing. He was urged to go home early. A coworker said, I'll give you a ride home. When he got home, Ed said, I want you to come in the house. I want you to hear something. And he played for this coworker a tape recording of a conversation that Lisa had with her friend Nancy. The coworker of Ed's described the tape as being remarkably foul. He said it involved Nancy describing a drug dealer that was coming in from California, and then proceeded to describe in great detail her exploits with multiple men. Ed did not like Nancy and thought that she was a bad influence on Lisa, and said particularly offended by her interest in black men, and that she frequently went to black and tan clubs. So the coworker believed that the tape was authentic and of recent vintage because it discussed the upcoming Kentucky Derby, which was to be held that weekend. So the tape understandably upset Ed, and that's kind of how that one goes. Ultimately, we get the call from the Findlay police to the Arlington police that says, we've got the car here and there's a body in the trunk. So on Tuesday at 2:16 in the morning, the Arlington police call Ed and say, we think we found the car. They go to his house and they say, we found the car and there's a body in the trunk. And they say, we have to consider you a suspect at this point. The Arlington police check the house, they check the fireplace, they check the backyard. They find nothing out of order at that point. They advise him, again, that he is a suspect, and they ask him to turn over all the guns that he has, and he turns 3 guns over to them. The police then drive with Ed to Lima, which is an hour and 25 minutes, according to the records that night. The police interviewed dozens of people, and when I say the police, I mean the Arlington police, the Findlay police, the Lima police, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, the Dublin police, the Worthington police, and 2 homicides from the Columbus Police Department. So this is the chief of police on the left of Arlington. In the center is the chief of police of Findlay. On the right is Ralph Decker, a homicide detective from the city of Columbus. They're having a major powwow to talk about the Davenport case. So during all these discussions, we find out that there were multiple gunshots heard that night, the night of the murder. Gunshots near Galena. These show where the gunshots near Galena, Ohio. There were gunshots along the Scioto River about 5 miles north of the zoo. There were gunshots in the village of Woodstock. There were gunshots down at Central Point. The police checked into all of those. The police also did a physical inspection of Camp Mary Orton and also of Camp Lazarus. Both of those are on Route 23, which would be probably the most common way to get from Columbus to Findlay. So all of that revealed nothing. The police had to deal with the usual crackpots. Some suggested that they used psychics. Psychics, as best I know, were never used, but you certainly have to understand the temptation, there being no physical evidence to connect anyone to the crime and no physical evidence of where the murder actually took place. So at one point, Chief Thomas, about 10 days after the murder, he was the chief of the Arlington Police Department, reported to the press that he knew who did it, he knew where it happened, and he knew basically everything about the case. Now, whether he said that in an attempt to trap the murderer and trick the murderer into making some false move, or whether he said it to calm the fears of people who are getting a little antsy about people from Arlington who don't get murdered very often, we'll never know. I do want to spend a brief moment talking about two leads, and the file that you saw at the start of this presentation is enormous. Lots and lots of crazy leads that go nowhere. Two of my favorite leads, and maybe they go somewhere, maybe they don't. One involves Ed Davenport's fourth wife. After Lisa died, he got married again. And as his fourth wife was preparing to move from the Hilltop to the home on Cranford Road, she had some family members helping her pack things up to move. Her 12-year-old nephew of a friend of hers found a gun in the closet. Said, "What's this gun all about?" And Mrs. Davenport IV said, "Oh, Ed gave me that for safekeeping." I don't know what that's all about. Don't know. My favorite lead, and again, if you haven't worked any criminal cases in the past, you have to understand that people closest to the defendant are rarely saints, okay? This doesn't work that way. This witness shows up 3 weeks after the murder. His name's Charles Max Reese. He bragged to his coworkers that he knew Ed Davenport, and that at one time Ed Davenport had asked him if he would help him move a body. It's like, well, that's a pretty interesting story. Let's find out more. This Charles Reese Max said that he'd known Ed for about 10 years, and he knew Ed when Ed worked for a pinball machine company. And when Ed worked for a pinball machine company, he would sometimes hire Charles Max Reese and a fellow by the name of Cliff Harbor to go and scare people that presumably were either skimming money or using a competitor's pinball machines. Mr. Reese said, "We never did that, but we took Ed's money and told him we did it," okay? And he said, "But there was that time that he drove me out to the edge of West Jefferson, showed me a house and said, 'There's a guy that lives there and I'm going to kill him. And when I kill him, I want you to take the body. You get Cliff Harbor and the two of you take the body, take it down to Chillicothe and dump it.'" Now, whether that's a chilling preview of an MO or whether that's just a guy that likes to tell stories, or whether that's a guy that thought he could get out of the jam he was in Pickaway County where he was in jail for grand larceny, I guess we'll never know. I will say this, that you just have to get used to the fact that those kind of leads are out there all the time. Ed's motives are as old as time. She was less than faithful. She had boyfriends. There's a lot of loose ends out there. I'm going to tell you that this is Lisa Davenport. I know part of this I've been lighthearted about, but she was a real person, and she died at a very young age. There were unsubstantiated stories about prostitution rings run out of a hair salon, prostitution rings run out of a real estate office, wife swapping, participants in this being gay. All I can tell you is those were all unsubstantiated stories. The bottom line is I can't wrap this up into a neat and tidy package and tell you who did it, where it happened, or anything else. But I can tell you that I think at the end of this you'll understand why as a 14-year-old, I was drawn to this case, not just as a whodunit, but it was a tawdry tale at every turn. So Darrell's going to wrap up, and I've been told quickly because we're out of time.
Yeah. Yeah, we will go real quick. I'm sure one thing that you want to know is, okay, so what happened to a couple of these people? Lou Gray became a teacher at Whetstone. He retired through the state teachers retirement system, and he died recently. Ed Davenport. All right, I'm a lawyer. Do you think I would advise a client to get remarried 4 months after your wife was murdered? That's what he did. He remarried 4 months after his wife died. He was fired from his job at Buckeye Federal. He then got a job at BBF. He was a manager at BBF, and 1 year later, the BBF was robbed when he was there. So he cooperated with the police in trying to solve that. In 1972, at age 36, Ed Davenport died of cancer. So he's been gone for over 50 years. This case happened 58 years ago.
Thank you for coming out tonight, and yeah, let's give a round of applause for our presenters. Thank you.
Good. We'll be happy to entertain any other